Welcome to Eureka. We are going to have a very interesting conversation with Professor Vivek Datar, who is the project director of India-based neutrino project and also the head of neutrino cell in TIFR in Mumbai. It's a very interesting story. He was searching for something he didn't find, and he was so happy that he was not able to find. Keep watching Eureka. Before that, take a look at his brief profile. Let's look at what is that mystery.
Presently, Dr. Vivek Datar is a senior professor at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR, Mumbai since May 2015. He obtained his PhD from University of Mumbai in 1983 and did postdoctoral work at IPN, Orsay, France and Stony Brook, USA. Before moving to TIFR, he was at the Nuclear Physics Division, Bhabha Atomic Research Center from 1975 to 2015. He was a senior professor of Homi Bhabha National Institute and Dean Academic for Physical and Mathematical Sciences, BARC. He has also been the head of the Nuclear Physics Division at BARC, Mumbai, and an adjunct professor at the School of Natural Sciences, TIFR. His area of interest include low-energy nuclear physics, tests of conservation laws and symmetries, and neutrino physics. In 2015, he moved to TIFR Mumbai and took over as project director of India-based Neutrino Observatory project in 2016, which aims to build a large world-class underground laboratory at Puttipuram, Tamil Nadu. Professor Datar has also been conferred with various prestigious awards. Noted among them is N.S. Satyamurthy Award of the Indian Physics Association in 1988. He is also a fellow of the Maharashtra Academy of Sciences.
Thank you for being with us. It's a very interesting
Yes.
opportunity to have a very interesting conversation with you, who is heading a very important fundamental science project.
Yes.
India-based neutrino observatory, which is yet to come up, which is facing quite a lot of struggle. We will talk about that. But I was told that you were searching for Axion and you didn't get, but you were very happy. It's a very, very funny situation.
Yeah. In science and also in physics, it happens that there are theories, but those theories have to be validated. There are plenty of theories, but finally there is only one truth. So in that context, there was a theory which proposed that there's something called the strong CP problem. In that connection, the axion was proposed.
Okay.
So this axion...
What is this strong CP problem?
Okay, the strong CP is that in strong interactions, CP would not be violated, but there are certain corrections to this, so-called instanton corrections, will lead to a very large CP violation. And we know that CP is conserved in strong interactions. So there has to be something else that restores this symmetry. So in that connection, one proposal was that there exists the axion. And this axion, nobody knew the mass, but in some theories, the mass was very tiny and so on, or it could be large.
So
In
the
any
axion
case-
was a proposed particle to solve
Proposed
a
particles.
physical
To solve the physics,
mystery.
Yeah, the mystery, that's right. And if this existed, then it was possible that reactors could be a very strong source. There were other sources also, but reactor was one of them. The reactor could be a very strong source. So in the neutron capture by proton in a reactor, in a light water reactor, instead of spitting out a photon and forming the deuteron and releasing 2.2 MeV energy, you could put out an axion.
Okay.
And say if the axion was very light, then it would be highly relativistic. And this axion could then decay into two photons, but because of the boost, there will be a strong Doppler shift, and you would observe these two photons at fairly large energies. So that is what we looked for. We looked for two photons with roughly 1.1 MeV energy in two different detectors. We did the experiment in BRC in the Apsara reactor first, and then we moved to the Tarapur power reactor, where we found, of course, we put detectors. We also had to improvise. So as they say in Hindi, jugaad, we had to do some jugaad with whatever existing apparatus. But beg, borrow, modify something and so on. This was part of my PhD thesis. So we looked for it, we didn't find it. So that ruled out a part of the space in which axion was supposed to exist. Of course, even to this day, there are experiments at CERN going on to look for extremely light axions. And that's experiment, it's still not resolved whether the axion exists or not. But at least in one domain, it
one
doesn't
kind of
exist.
axion
One kind
if
of
there is
axion.
axion, then it cannot have this
in
character.
one's kind of parameter space, it doesn't exist.
That's what
at
you
the
were,
level that we have looked for. Again, I should be very careful.
Yeah, that's what your PhD.
That's right. That was part of my PhD thesis.
That's a very interesting thing, and I was also told that this continued universe service. I mean, like you were trying to find a 17 kV neutrino, and even that was missing.
That was also, so there was a claim in I think 84, 85 or something around that time that there is evidence for about 3% of the time in beta decays you have a 17 kV neutrino being emitted.
No, wait, let's start with fundamental. What do you mean by beta decay?
Beta decay is the decay in which, let's say, a neutron changes to a proton plus a electron plus a antineutrino.
Okay, that is a proton, which is a charged particle.
Or a proton bound in a nucleus can also decay to a neutron and to a positron and a neutrino. Okay, or you can have electron capture. That's also, so these are all weak, so-called weak processes. So they occur, their strengths are very small, so they occur very slowly and so on. For instance, in the sun also we have this weak interaction going on, which actually powers the sun. Two protons fuse to form a deuteron, but then where is the missing charge going? That is going in the positron, but then where is the lepton number going? So you have a neutrino. So if the neutrino were not there, the sun wouldn't shine actually. So we are.
So that is about beta decay.
Yeah, that's
so what was your problem?
So we looked for it. If it is, this was actually found by a group in tritium beta decay. So we said, okay, if this kind of mixing exists, it should be there in all beta decays. So we looked for it in sulfur. Of course, we are not the only ones. There are other groups as well. But we did the experiment pretty fast, and we could get that published pretty quickly. We found that it is not at the level that was being proposed in that paper, and we put a bound, upper bound. That means it is 5 times at least, if at all, less than what he was proposing. So we ruled it out at that level. There were subsequently there were experiments we ruled it out by a factor of 10, 20, and so on. But as of now, there is no evidence of the 17 kV. Had it been there, it would have been a big surprise.
Okay.
And to accommodate that in the structure of particle physics would have been.
So now let me ask certain fundamental questions so that we can also understand your work in a context. You use a word called particle physics.
Yes.
So this is not something that most of us would have heard about. We could have heard about thermodynamics, we could have heard about let's say sound. These are the kind of thing that you learn in school. So what is this particle physics? What kind of questions it asks?
So particle physics actually deals with the fundamental constituents of matter. It is also sometimes called high energy physics because we are pushing the frontiers of energy in order to search for smaller and smaller entities. So as we know, all of matter is made up of atoms and molecules. If you go further deep, then the atom consists of electrons and nuclei around which they move. And the nuclei in turn consists of protons, neutrons, and so on, and maybe virtual particles like pions and so on. But then if you look further into the nucleon, then you find that there are so-called quarks. They are point particles, but they are fractionally charged and so on. We don't know what happens if you look further into quarks. People are still looking. But as of now, quark is the smallest entity. So
that's what we know right now.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, we are trying to understand the nature through its fundamental constituents. So one is, what are the fundamental constituents? The other question that you might ask is, how do they interact? That makes things, life very interesting. So there are 4 fundamental interactions as we know. The so-called strong interaction, the strong nuclear interaction between quarks, which then translates into also the strong interaction between nucleons.
So this strong interaction is what keeps, let's say for
nucleus
example, atomic
bound.
nucleus bound.
Yeah, that's right.
Because otherwise
in fact,
two protons.
Yeah, at the fundamental level, it's the so-called quantum chromodynamic interaction, which keeps the quarks inside a nucleon bound. That's the fundamental. So this is a kind of, the nucleon force is kind of residual force, just as you have electromagnetic interaction between electron and the nucleus, but then when you put 2 atoms together, you have the so-called residual, still electromagnetic, but the so-called van der Waals interaction. So it's similar to that.
So the strong interaction is what keeps 2 protons sitting inside a nucleus.
Yes,
Otherwise, they should be repulsing.
They will repel. Yeah, that's right. They would just fall apart.
So that is strong is one fundamental force.
One fundamental interaction. The other fundamental interaction is the electromagnetic interaction. So this we go by strength. Okay? Electromagnetic interaction is about 100 times weaker than the strong interaction, but that is the one responsible for photons, and they are the carriers of this interaction.
I mean, even this television channel.
Yeah, the television, the mobile phones that you use, the radio communication that you use. I mean, everything. Most of the thing that matters in the universe, as we know it, is electromagnetic. All our communications are. Also, what we see in the universe. Now, of course, there are other channels opening up, but this is the most used thing. Telescopes look at it through light or infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, this, that. Okay. The third kind of interaction is the so-called weak interaction. That is about 10 or 12 orders of magnitude weaker than the electromagnetic interaction. It's very weak. And one measure of that is that the fusion reaction that is going on, the first fusion reaction, the primary fusion reaction that is going on in the sun, two protons fusing to form a deuteron nucleus and positron and neutrino, that if it were not going through the weak interaction, the sun would have burnt itself out. Of course, the other things would be violated, but just on the scale, then it would have burnt itself out in days or things like that, right? The fact that the weak interaction is responsible for that primary reaction makes the sun sort of burn at a very slow rate and for billions of years. That gave enough time for life to evolve on this earth, right? Billions of years. You need that, otherwise life will not evolve.
If all the energy had been released in a very
just
short...
strong interaction, then it wouldn't have gone through. Electromagnetic also it wouldn't have gone through. So it needed the weak interaction. So the neutrino is a very fundamental, particle in that sense, which is...
So that's the
which
third
interacts
force.
only weakly.
That's a third interaction.
That's
fourth.
the final one is the gravitational interaction, which is the weakest of them all, but which is responsible for the Earth going around the sun and the solar system going around the center of our galaxy and so on. It
If
involves
you throw a
big
ball,
things.
the ball comes back to your hand.
That's right.
whatever.
And this is in the news recently, of course, because we have detected after 100 years of Einstein predicting it, we have measured gravitational waves, which is a fantastic thing in terms of technology. I mean, you have measured a strain which is of the order of 10 to the minus 21, which is 10,000 or 100,000 times smaller than the nuclear strain. And using what? Using lasers of wavelengths which are 5,000 angstrom, which is 10 to the minus 5 of that order centimeters. We have measured something which is 10 to the
Smaller
minus,
than an atom
10 to the minus 18, much smaller than a nucleus. It's just a
That's
fantastic
a
feat of technology. So anyway, that's about gravitation. That's
See,
the
you
weakest.
said when we are talking about fundamental constituents,
Yes.
you said that as far as we know,
Yes.
for example, quarks are the fundamental constituents, electrons are
Of the
fundamental
nucleons,
constituents, or let's say neutrinos.
Yes.
These all become
Yes.
the, let's say, the fundamental particles.
That's right.
You also said that we don't know if there is anything inside quarks. I mean, it's
Yeah, we
smaller
don't
than-
know. We don't know. Yeah. But
Now you talked about 4 interactions.
Yes.
Are we sure that there are the only 4?
These are the ones which we know. Perhaps there might be a fifth, we don't know. So people have been looking for this. And as always, I mean, you can always ask this question, is there a fifth? Are there particles other than what you have seen? So for instance, we believe that there is so-called dark matter. Okay, so what is the constitution of the dark matter? May not be in the form that we know. It may be a completely different form of matter. We don't know. So these are all open questions. There might be new interactions as well. We don't know. But at least as of now, this is our understanding.
So which means that there are things to know.
Yeah, sure.
So students need not think that everything has been discovered and...
By the way, this the same story existed in around 1900 or so when Kelvin said that everything is now understood. Now it's just decimal places that you can fill. But then came relativity, then came quantum mechanics, and it changed the whole scenario. So we might be in a similar situation
So
now.
for all
And
you know,
in fact,
tomorrow...
in fact, we know that the fact that the neutrinos have mass and that they mix already tells us that the standard model is not the ultimate model. There has to be something
So
beyond.
some revolution should be taking place.
That's right.
That's a very interesting point. We'll take a very short break here. Keep watching Eureka. We are going to talk about other areas of his work. I mean, you would have heard about something called alpha particle. How does this alpha particle help us understand light nuclei? What kind of shapes that it takes? Keep watching Eureka. We'll talk about it after this break. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very interesting, very enriching conversation with Dr. Vivek Datar, who is the professor at Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. He is heading the INO cell in TIFR in Mumbai, and he is also the project director for India-based neutrino project, a very massive fundamental science project that is in offing in India. We were talking about some of your earlier work.
Yes.
2 of your work, I mean, you were searching for something you never found. Then another area that you have been looking at is trying to understand light nuclei,
Yes.
right? The shapes of light nuclei. What are light nuclei first?
So, for instance, this kind of largest binding energy nucleus that we have in the light systems is alpha particle.
Okay.
It seems to be a very tightly bound system. You also cannot excite it very easily. The first excited state is some 20 MeV, which almost is near the breakup threshold. Okay. So, I mean, we all know probably of alpha decay.
Yeah.
Alpha, beta, gamma decay. So, alpha decay. Now, in the light nuclei, these alpha particles can form structures. Okay, and there have been claims that such a long structure has been found, a 6 alpha chain has been found, 4 alpha chain, and so on.
Let me understand this. The kind of thing that we study in school is like a round ball, which is the nucleus, where all your protons and neutrons are sitting like like a mixture that you have. But you were saying that's not exactly the kind of imagination that you can...
In the light nuclei, some of these nucleons can come together, form an alpha particle, and be that for some fraction of the time. Sometimes they are like nucleons moving in a well and so on. So it is these light nuclei offer you the possibility of looking at this alpha type structure, especially ones so-called 4n nuclei, multiple alphas. So the lightest of them all, I mean, of course, alpha, you have to make 2 alphas, and that becomes beryllium 8. That's an unstable nucleus. It lives only for 10 to the minus 16 seconds.
Okay.
However, it's a kind of dumbbell structure. That was the conjecture, and indeed that turns out to be right, actually. But we looked at the excited states of this, and we basically found evidence for this dumbbell which is rotating and radiating. So it's like an antenna which emits radiation. We measure it.
So if it is a dumbbell structure and then rotating,
yes,
you are saying that it should be radiating in a particular...
anything that accelerates, because when you have rotation, you have acceleration. Okay, centrifugal forces and so on are there. So we looked at this radiation, and we found it, of course, at roughly the level that was expected in some models, but different models have different predictions. It's a very small fraction. So from 0 signal, we went to a very small signal. So the branching ratio is 1 part in 10 to the 7th. So that makes it challenging. That's why, nobody had done that experiment before. And then we later subsequently improved that to initially it was a 30% accuracy measurement. We made it 10%. So now it can, address models a little more better. And we find that while it roughly agrees with models, we probably need to bring in reaction as well as structure. So that is one of the contributions that we think. So it has contributed to the alpha-like structure in one of the lightest alpha structure nuclei, which is probably you can think of as a hydrogen molecule of alphas in terms of nuclei.
So from your talk, what I can gather is that a particle physicist like you.
Well, I was a nuclear physics person, but doing things which are in the which are of interest to particle physics as well. Yes.
So basically, you are trying to look at what is the structure below atom.
Yeah.
That is structures below levels of atom, and also look at what kind of particles exist, what kind of interaction exists. That's a kind of interesting question. It should be extremely difficult to look at those kinds of structures. It's not like you take a microscope and look at it, or it's not a building.
So you have to make nuclear reactions and then look at the signal and sift it out from noise. So you have to employ techniques which are sort of nuclear physics people use such techniques in different contexts. We have to make a gas target, and we have to build a system such that the gamma rays from those, the things that isolate the gas from the vacuum, because the beam has to come in vacuum, that has to be nicely shielded. So we did all such things. So it's fun. It's doing all such things.
One question that I want to ask before we go to a break and then go to our next section is, usually, if you look at the time that you would have passed out of your college, people in India would be looking at joining, some place like IIT. Bright students would look for such an opportunity because that was seen as the goal, right? So, how did you land up into research?
Okay. The way I landed up in research was that I somehow got interested in science because maybe I did reasonably well. I got some prize, some books which I read. I got attracted by them and so on. And then I got, of course, a good place in IIT. I would have joined it. But then I also got a so-called science talent scholarship, which was there in those days. And I decided to go to science. And because that scholarship was only meant for science. But anyway,
But what inspired you to science?
Oh, so there are people like, I read some biography of Fermi by Laura Fermi, Atoms in the Family. I also had started to read these Feynman lectures on physics in the 11th standard. They are very, very nicely written, and you get a feeling that you're talking to Feynman.
Yeah,
and he explains so simply, very, very simply. And there are these red books which I got some second hand on the road somewhere in Bangalore. And so
People
I got
generally
attracted
joke
by
that there are two red books which are very famous, Mao's Red Book and
No, this is the Feynman Red Book. They're pretty big books, 3 volumes. Of course, I didn't get to the 3rd volume at that time, but I was reading the 1st volume and a little bit of the 2nd, and I got attracted by that. So I got attracted to physics. So I went and did a BSc in Bangalore, and then after that I joined again IIT for MSc. But then after a couple of weeks, I had also given the interview for BRC training school, which the conflict sort of situation. But anyway, I decided finally to go to BRC to do nuclear physics.
That's a very interesting.
yeah.
Do you regret going to science rather than joining IIT?
No, I don't regret. I think I enjoyed every bit of it. I may have been lucky because I joined a group of Professor C.V.K. Baba. Actually, he was a part of BRC. He was called Dr. C.V.K. Baba. And that was a great learning experience. He was a great human being as well. He's no more now, but I had a fantastic time with him. And he apparently had only one student, which he took. And it happened to be, I learnt of that from some other source from our head of the division later. But anyway, it was a marvelous experience working with him. But then I also, interacted with some of our colleagues in BRC. One I should mention is Deepak Chakravarti. We have interacted very closely. And, they used to call us a Jodi somehow. We worked together for a very long period of time on experiments, collaborating and so on, writing papers.
That's an interesting point, and this is a time that we will take a very short break. After this break, we are going to talk about what is this India-based neutrino project which he is heading right now, and there are lots of controversies and questions about it. We are going to ask him about that. After the break, keep watching Eureka. Welcome back to Eureka. We are having a very interesting and engaging conversation with Dr. Vivek Dattar, who is also heading the INO cell in TIFR in Mumbai and also the project director for India-based neutrino observatory. What is this India-based neutrino observatory? What will it study? How will it study?
Okay. The India-based neutrino observatory is basically going to look at neutrinos, but then since this is best done in an underground lab with a large cover of rock, there will also be other experiments there set up which will benefit from this low cosmic ray background. However, the flagship experiment there that we are planning is based on the so-called iron calorimetric detector to measure atmospheric neutrinos. Now, neutrinos are very interesting particles and probably some of the least understood among all these fundamental particles that we know. Electron, as you know, is very well understood, quarks, lots of experiments. Neutrino is perhaps the least understood, but also probably the most interesting from the point of view of its properties.
Okay.
So, the experiment that we are planning hopes to measure one of these properties at least. The others it will measure with sort of comparable or maybe slightly poorer precision than other experiments elsewhere. But this we think, at least at the time that the project was, even now, we would like to understand the mass ordering of these. It turns out that neutrinos have a small mass.
Okay.
About 1 million times smaller than that of the electron.
Okay.
It's not zero. As if the standard model were correct, it would have had 0 mass. It's not so. So we have to go anyway beyond the standard model. So this already is a new thing. But it's since there are 3 kinds of neutrinos that we know, electron, muon, and tau type. There are also 3 masses associated with it. And some of the experiments have shown that the difference of masses fall into 2 groups. So between M1 and M2, delta M squared is called. Anyway, that difference, mass square difference is small. The other one is bigger. Now, but we don't know. So we know the ordering between M1 and M2. M2 is larger than M1. But we don't know whether M3 is larger or whether it is smaller.
Oh, okay.
So this is the thing that we will attack with the iCal detector. Now, one might ask the question, okay, so what? Suppose the ordering is this way or that way. Okay, it will throw out half the theories, but so what? Well, taken together with other experiments that are trying to measure the matter-antimatter asymmetry. Okay, so there are experiments which will measure the mass square difference, but also try to measure CP violation. But in accelerator experiments, unfortunately, both these things get clubbed together.
Okay.
Whereas in the iCal experiment, we will only measure mass ordering. Okay, so there is a ambiguity which will be there in the accelerator-based experiments, which will be removed if you take these together. So together we will know whether there is any matter-antimatter asymmetry in this sector. We know that there is matter-antimatter asymmetry in the universe because we have more of matter and we see very little,
don't see any
if at all,
antimatter
of antimatter. Okay. So
The only
where does
antimatter
this,
most
what is the
likely that
origin
you'll
of that?
see is only in positron tomography.
In
PET scan.
Yeah, that's right. For a short while, of course, you can produce antiparticles. But just as matter, as existing as planets, we don't see any of that. Right? So why is that? So that's a fundamental question which was actually asked a long time ago, and indeed Sakharov, the Russian scientist, made fundamental contributions to it. So this can arise through the quark sector or through the leptonic sector, as far as you can say. And in the quark sector, it doesn't appear that there is enough of that as asymmetry. So is it there in the leptonic sector? And neutrinos have provided lots of surprises. For instance, the mixings are very large here in the neutrino sector. The electron, muon and tau mix quite a lot as compared to in the quark sector. So it is possible that there is CP violation in this sector which will account for that. So this is the mass ordering taken together with experiments, accelerated experiments, which are sensitive to CP violation as well as mass ordering. There is a synergy between these experiments that we hope that we will get an answer to this question. If it turns out that there is no such big CP violation here, then we'll have to look for another source. But if we do find it here, then that's solved at least one problem.
See, one of the questions that many people ask
Yes.
when one is engaged in this kind of a very fundamental basic science
Yes.
research,
Yes.
which is trying to understand what the world is. What people usually call as blue sky research. Why
That's
the
right.
sky is blue.
That's right. Yes.
What's the use of it?
So, I will not give the answer which was given by Faraday because I am nowhere near that. But what I can say certainly is that to make such measurements, you require massive detectors. So, it's a huge engineering effort actually. And not only that, you require to do things in ways that will involve companies, which will involve industry, because you want to do it all from in India. Okay, so it will involve industry in India, also obviously in Tamil Nadu, and so it will benefit industry, and we will have to make innovations also in the process. So that will also benefit industry. I mean, it will be a two-way process. So I think this is, of course, finally. Since we are looking at new knowledge, I mean, this will also excite young students to come into science. Something which is I think good for everybody. I mean, after all, we are going into a science-based, society. So I think it is important that young people come into science. I mean, maybe more are needed in engineering, but certainly good students should also come into science, and this will help attract them into science because you're doing something which is fundamental, which is state of art, which is you're competing with the best people in the world.
That's it.
So
that's a very interesting point, and perhaps this is a place where we need to end this interview for lack of time. Thank you for watching this program. Keep watching Rekha. We'll come back with another episode next week.